correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend. How's it going, Steve?
Hey, what's happening?
And we have a couple very special guests this week. Before we get into our guests and before we get into me and you and all the fun shenanigans, let's talk about our podcast of the week. So the podcast of the week is Prime by Cortex.
Yes, JT and
the
Kirby.
crew. Yeah.
To both of them, all of them, something like that.
Yeah.
They both sound the same, so I'm insistent that they are JT Lambino. But anyway,
Well, I mean, we did have Kirby on and kept confusing him.
yes. Well, the sad part is their voices actually sound similar enough that it's not hard to do. But
Yeah.
in any case, Prime by Cortex is a podcast all about Cortex Prime.
No.
Say that 3 times fast. But they do a bunch of interviews with assorted creators. They've done some actual play. They talk about the different things you can do with Cortex Prime, which there are a lot of.
Yeah, coming from somebody who has yet to play Cortex Prime, I really like Prime by Cortex. It's a really useful tool.
Yeah.
It's helped me learn a lot about that system. So definitely one to check out.
Yep.
Well, Steve, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guests to,
Okay.
I don't know what you want to say, guests to the podcast land.
Yeah, something like that. Well, one of them is a returning guest, and the other one is by no means an unfamiliar voice. But today we're going to be talking about big stompy robots and the assorted fun with Brett Bowen and GM Phil from Studio 404.
Salutations, Gamer Nation. How is everybody out there?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you guys, well, long time ago, Phil reached out and said, hey, if you guys ever want to talk about mecha games, and of course you guys have Mechasys out, and
Yep.
I'm sure we'll talk about that quite a bit. You know, I bought it. Haven't read all of it yet because I don't read all of anything I ever buy.
Gee, what's that like?
You just enjoy the mystery of it all.
Well, it's one of those, I want to use this for something, I'm buying it, and frankly, I'm closer to using this for something than I am a lot of other things I've bought, so I don't know what that means, but
I feel that seriously a lot. I really do. So many things I am this used to using.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because just this morning on Facebook, there was somebody talking about building a ship over time that was like the place where the entire crew and game are in all the time and they're traveling from place to place.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
They want the ship to build over time too, like a character, as opposed to just like a piece of gear. And I'm like, have you looked at Mechasys and the build point system that it uses and how that's used to build up a quote unquote vehicle, perhaps?
Mhm.
Possibly, maybe.
Well, I think that's one of the cool things you guys did with that.
Yeah.
So where do we want to start with this? Because Mecha, does it really come from what, probably anime is kind of where it kind of got its start with like Gundam and Robotech and such? Or
Probably go back a little bit farther to Shogun Warriors.
okay.
All the super robot shows that came out in the early to mid 70s, stuff that came over here as a thing that was shown on a lot of the local syndication stations called Force 5, had Starvengers, had Guy King, Grandizer, Transor Z. Eventually it rolls into Voltron.
Yeah.
And then after the super robot craze, finally Gundam comes out, and it's a completely different take on the whole aspect of it. It's not like some powerful robot fighting off monsters. It's basically World War II in space with giant mecha. It is not clear defined who is good and who is bad, because both sides are pretty crappy, but both sides also have good people on them. And then it just kind of goes from there. You know, then it goes into Robotech, and then it goes into even a little bit Transformers, and Battletech comes along, and all these other various mecha games that have come down the pipe that want to emulate and latch on to that nostalgia and the stories that those mecha games, those mecha shows had.
I think too, it's just, I mean, who doesn't want to be a big stompy robot with a giant gun?
Who doesn't want to drive a big stompy robot with a giant gun? I mean, like, you know, and the more guns, the better it is.
Who doesn't want to drive a big stompy robot with a giant gun with your friends?
Right, in an organized, unit of soldiers of big stumpy robots.
Or all of you pilot the same big stompy robot. That's fun too.
It can be, yeah. But then that gets into we're flying a ship. It just is on the ground.
A little bit.
Somewhat.
But like, okay,
You get the legs.
No, that's the old way of thinking. The new way of thinking is I'm a leg.
I forgot about that.
Oh, so good. That new cartoon is just so good. They even brought in the whole Sven versus Shiro angle of the difference between the Japan version and the American version.
So my first exposure to mecha in RPGs was probably a combination of Robotech and Rifts, which shared a system, and I think, at least in my head, also exemplifies the problem with a lot of mecha games in that, look, for those who have never experienced Palladium, there is a rule for everything. There's hit point totals and armor totals and everything for everything individually, and you can't ever find the rules that tell you how they relate.
Yes, for those of you who have never had the pleasure of playing Palladium, God bless you.
You are so
I
lucky.
mean, the worlds are amazing.
The worlds are amazing. The rule set is mind-boggling.
Well, I've said the only person who has ever played Palladium rules as written is Kevin Simbita, because everyone else is still trying to find the book that rule is written in.
Seriously.
There's also something about ignore all the previous books, grab the most recent book because that's the most powerful one.
Well, power creep. Oh my God. But in that, most of, at least in my head, and I don't know if this is entirely the case, because the only other mecha game I've looked into any amount is Mechton Zeta.
Yep.
By their nature and because of the era they came out, they were very much simulationist games. And so as a simulation, you have rules and fiddly numbers and lots of lines of numbers. And while it's simulation-y, and if we're playing a mecha miniatures game, that makes some sense. I don't want to do that anymore at an RPG table.
We understand each other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, where did you guys get into mecha and then go, oh, let's make mecha for Genesis, I guess?
Well, it all goes back to the TV shows that I mentioned. I mean, those came out, Channel 25 Boston up here at a very formative age, like when I was like 5, 6, 7, those shows started coming out. And then Transformers came out, and then Robotech was out, and I was just friggin' hooked. I especially latched on to Robotech something fierce. And when Palladium made the Robotech role-playing game, I actually remember picking up the Macross core rulebook for $10 at a Star Trek convention up here. That's where I first got it.
That's a steal, man. Especially because, okay, all right, I'm going to pause you for a minute because I want to talk about that. When I was younger, we'll say, I was obsessed with Macross. Obsessed. So I went on a mission. I'm like, there is a role-playing game of Macross. I went on a mission to find it. You know that book is ridiculous now, right? Like, to find it in physical is ridiculously expensive.
I've got it right over there.
I hate you. I hate
It's in a box.
like a couple $100. Like,
I take that back. I think it was $15 because that's the cover price. But I got it for the cover price. And that's where it started. And admittedly, the Palladium system with the Robotech, this was like, you could almost say that Robotech was the test bed for the system that became Rifts. And it wasn't bad. The numbers weren't ridiculous. They were high, but they weren't ridiculous. And it was fun. But it was Palladium, so I kept an eye out for something different. Then Mike Pondsmith, the guy who created Cyberpunk, he came out with a mecha Japanimation-based game, Mechton. I missed out on the first one, but Mechton 2 was the iteration that I found when I was in college, early 90s. And it eventually became Mechton Zeta, and then it became something else.
Zeta Plus, I think, is the
Zeta
current.
Plus, yeah, I think that was it. And each iteration gave it more and more complexity. Like you said, it gave it a lot more crunch, because that was what the 90s were all about. They're all about the crunch, all the tactical play, and even into the 2000s a little bit. I mean, like, the mecha creations, the mecha construction point system got it down to like the 100ths of a percent. hundredths of a decimal in when you're like are building and tweaking to get your mecha within like 52 points or whatever the heck your build project was.
Mm-hmm.
But then it kind of went on from there, and it faded into the background a little bit because no one was really doing mecha really well. And I really also didn't have a bunch of folks who were more interested in that. I mean, like D&D 3rd edition was just coming out, and Star Wars role-playing game had just gotten obtained by Wizards of the Coast. So folks were diving into that, and, admittedly, that's where I was kind of going too. But I always had mecha in the back of my head. I always had fun with it. I always liked doing it.
We should also mention that when we met in college, Phil introduced me to BattleTech, and we had a fairly regular game of that going on every once in a while.
We did.
I don't think any individual lasted particularly long, but it was always, those books are right there on the shelf. We could just play some BattleTech.
They're right there. We just play some BattleTech. We played it straight, man. So we'd have like these role-playing sessions, and the role-playing sessions would be fine, but then we'd bust out the maps, and there would go the next 5 hours.
Yep.
Because BattleTech. And like 8 on, even a nice 6-on-5 Inner Sphere versus Clanners 5-hour battle. But we had fun. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I had a blast playing Rifts. It was some of my formative RPG stuff.
Absolutely.
But to look at that rule set now, after having seen so much of what's come since, it's like, I want to play the world, but I don't want to deal with. I remember hour-and-a-half character creation when you knew where to look for stuff.
I will say Savage Rifts is fun.
I haven't dived into it yet.
Especially with the right GM, Savage Rifts is fun.
Cool.
And hasn't it been announced that the person who was in charge of Savage Rifts is going to be the inheritor from Symbieta?
Yes.
That's what I heard.
Sean Robertson.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually he works officially, because technically, at least as of last I was aware, although he was the line lead for Savage Rifts, he was technically a freelancer with Pinnacle. And he is in some capacity a staff member at Palladium, in addition to still being the line lead for Savage Rifts now, if I'm not mistaken.
Nice.
Interesting.
Nice. Well, good. Good.
That sounds promising.
Yes. So towards the end of 2019, I'd always wanted to, well, even prior to that, once Genesis came out and once the initial buzz died down and we got Starcana out the door, and I always started thinking like, okay, what can we do with this system? What have I always wanted to do? I have always had in the back of my head a desire to find some system that I can do mecha in. Mecha has always been a massive favorite of mine. I did some Gundam model building younger, kind of got out of it for a bit, and I kind of fell back into it hardcore at the end of 2019. And the pandemic really only fueled that, because what the hell else are you going to do? But I'm like, we got Genesis up and running, Starcana out the door. And then my brain shifted over to like, okay, how can you do mecha? Because people had talked about doing mecha and what you could do with mecha and how you could make it work. And during a discussion I had with GM Chris, the idea came up of mecha having their own stat block, in the sense of like they have brawn, agility, cunning, intellect, and all those. And there was this isn't like a roundtable discussion. I want to say it was at Gamer Nation Con, but I could be mistaken. And a bunch of folks like, oh God, no, we don't do that. Don't want that to happen. That definitely planted a seed in my head, because kind of the idea of where the mecha construction system in Mechasys came from. It was very much based on the mecha are characters.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the Super Robot shows, but even in like a bunch of these Gundam series that are out there in Pacific Rim, that's another great example that the mecha, the vehicle, if it doesn't have a personality of its own, at least has a presence of its own. It's got this anthropomorphic. Is that the right word I'm looking for?
I think.
What's that?
Gravitas.
Yeah, gravitas. That's a better word. It's got this gravitas about it, where you assign a subconscious personality to it. You want to treat it, because it is a humanoid shape in most cases. You give it a personality. You give it a weight. You give it gravitas. So we wanted to incorporate that into the mecha design system. So we made the mecha construction system practically works mark for mark parallel with character design. And you build your mecha's strength, you build its presence, you build its agility, its powers. It's all of it's built the same way that you build your character. And that helps give it that connection between this mecha actually is a character.
Well, I think that's, you bring it up in specific with the mecha anime and so forth. But I mean, even like Dukes of Hazzard. Look, the General Lee was the star of the show.
Yep. The Millennium Falcon is most certainly has a personality.
Right. Even
on many levels, actually.
Some of the Fast and the Furious movies. The cars are characters in their own right.
The car.
And that's been one of the things that with Genesis that like in core rules, vehicles are this thing and they're all pretty much the same because it's a narrative system. Well, they are, but that doesn't help you tell a story where the vehicle is special.
Yeah.
And Mecha take that to kind of another level because you have like one of the more recent animes that I've watched that I really enjoyed was Last Hope. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's on Netflix. But there, the mecha are very individualized and so on.
I'll have to check that out.
I would say it's probably. What do you think, Steve? Is it fair to say that's kind of a spiritual successor to like Evangelion in a certain way?
It's got that. Everything wants to be a spiritual successor to Evangelion, but yeah, no, Last Hope's good, or something that does that really well. I mean,
does it have scenes where the characters just stare at each other silently for 20
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, and it's great.
Okay, good.
I mean, I love Evangelion, but yeah, I understand why people are like that show is slow. Yes, it is. Yeah, you're right. It's very slow. It's also in 10-year-old me watched that. But anyway.
90.
See, I'm just still wondering what the heck's up with the penguin. But anyway.
It's a penguin. Just deal with it. That's the least weird thing of that show. That is the surface level weird that show starts into.
Huh, that's kind of quirky. Anyway, back to angels.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the angels are destroying the earth. What? Yeah, they're trying to bring about the apocalypse. Okay.
Footnote.
Yeah. As a footnote, this is Pangu. He lives here. Just deal with it. No, and then you have stuff like, I mean, I could go on. I'm a huge mech anime fan. So like Gurren Lagann, most of the Gundam series. I'm actually more of I'm a weird Gundam fan in that I don't like a lot of the popular Gundam series, but like 8th MS Team is my favorite Gundam series.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, so I'm the guy that's like
Norris Packard, man.
Yeah, I'm the guy that's like I like the Gundam series where they're like tanks.
Iron Blood Orphans?
I hate the characters. I hate them. I hate every single one of the characters.
I can get there.
I've watched it and I'm like, okay, I get the gist of this and it's cool. I dig it, but I hate everybody.
Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't watched it in a few seconds. I am pissed that they fridged that girl.
Oh, yeah.
Laughter. I am so pissed they fridged Laughter. There was no reason for that.
No, she was. No, I'm not. We're not going to have a spoiler conversation about it. But there's a whole conversation I can have because I watched that series and I was like, this is both good and terrible all at the same time.
I enjoyed it right up to that point, and at that point, I'm just like, all right, now I'm just watching the rest of it because I'm committed.
Yeah, I've wasted this much time at this point. I just want to get to the end. Although I will say that the figures from that series are fantastic.
They are some pretty mecha.
Barbados.
Barbados. My faves is Rebake Full City.
Okay, all right.
Rebake Full City is my favorite.
Yeah, but no, I don't even remember where I was going. But yeah, Mech is great.
The mech shows you did like and that sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah. The mech shows I like are the ones that I have to enjoy the characters, and I don't know. Gurren Lagann is my go-to mech show, even though it's sort of a deconstruction of the genre.
Okay,
that's actually a great reason to like it.
It is everything about mech tore down to its core and then rebuilt from the ground up, and it's a great man. That show's just great. How crazy can we get? How crazy can we take the ending to? Like,
I think what we've probably touched on is a large reason is why a lot of people look at Mechasys and say, "Is this really for anime?" Is because far more anime is prevalent for mecha type stories than
Yeah.
really anything else. The only thing that really sticks out in my head that isn't really anime style mechs is Battletech, where it's far more, this is just a vehicle that you're getting into and driving around.
Pacific Rim kind of goes over that. They're not quite the agile or acrobatic giants that most like Gundams, for instance, are, and Evangelion is even as well. They're definitely a bit more big and stompy with some pretty good maneuverability, really.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
that gets close.
Pacific Rim Black felt more traditional mecha. What I've watched of that.
Sure. I'll go there. I'll get there. Yeah.
But to the point of, in anime, it is far more common for the mecha to have its own personality, its own quirkiness, its own, like, often it's not just the fact that the pilot doesn't know how to pilot a mech yet. They might be great pilots, but they have to get to know this particular mecha in order to work well with it, to create a symbiosis with it. And that's really the angle that we went for with Mechasys, and the fact of the vehicle is more than just a vehicle; it's a character in its own right, and therefore we emulated the character building aspect of it. Of, you have characteristics that you need to buy up, you have hull trauma and system strain threshold that you need to buy up, and all sorts of upgrade, quote unquote, talents that you can use to improve things.
Yes, indeed.
We've struggled a bit with falling into the trap that so many other games have done, where it was tempting to become even more crunchy and to nail down absolutely everything.
Yeah. We
And
definitely had
we commonly had to step back and reevaluate and go, that's too far.
development of the mecha creation system took a full year.
Mhm.
It took a full year of trying something out, not working, trying another thing, not working, trying a third thing. Okay, this could work. Let's actually get it on the table. Okay, that didn't work. All right, let's go back.
And like 2 massive rewrites.
Two very massive rewrites.
And one of those was after some decent playtesting, and then after the rewrite happened, we did even more playtesting. Like, I want to say at least 3 months of playtesting total.
And as far as the rules that are actually in the Mechasys book, because we've got 2 books right now. We've got the Mechasys core rulebook and Big Guns and Blazing Swords, where we kind of took the idea of, well, let me explain for Mechasys, the core book. Keith Capel gave us some great feedback and great advice. He tested it and he's like, Phil, this is great. This is awesome. But if I were running this, I would want to be able to just choose a chassis, slap some weapons on it, and go. You can't really do that right now. You've got a lot of fiddly bits in here, and I think they're too much for just your average person like me who just wants to throw some guns on some mecha and just send them out. I'm like, okay, all right, that's cool. So we refined the weapon systems on the core book to just basically like make sure that we had a dozen to 20 different guns, knives, swords, beam cannons, missile launchers, whatever. I think it's like 40 weapons or 45 weapons or something like that in the core book. Actually, I think there's like 60, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
We boiled it down to what are the essential proxies for most of the weapons out there. Listed them out and then sent them forth. And then, like, as we were releasing Mechasys, we had already been working on what eventually would become Big Guns and Blazing Swords, because that was the weapon creation system that we were then testing at the tail end of the Mechasys testing. And so that's why, we released Mechasys in April. Big Guns and Blazing Swords was only a couple months later.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think though that fits, and this is something that I think maybe some people may have a slight misconception with Mechasys. Mechasys is not at all a setting book. It is purely mechanics. It is, so to speak, just a add-on to the core rule book for you to take and make your own stuff with.
Correct.
Totally. If anything, it is a really, really big and detailed tome.
In a way, but I think like Mecha is, like, I think for me, it's like the Mecha are a character in their own right. Much like you said, that was one of your design goals. And then you have different things you can do around them. You know what I mean? It's your Mecha are like, they're part of your vehicle for telling the story, and they're essential. I have a thought and it's stuck somewhere.
I
Like,
understand.
what I might be reading your mind from across several states is that another big important thing that we put into Mechasys is a how to do a session 0 for using Mechasys. Is, okay, first off, you have to understand, or define what mecha are doing in your setting in the first place. What role do they serve? Why are people using them?
Yeah.
Also, what's the standard mecha size going to be? Is the standard size silhouette 2? Is it silhouette 4? Is it silhouette, oh my god? And once you establish these, should they fly as a regular thing? Are they going to be out in space, or are they going to be planet bound? All these various things define the standard, and then you build from there.
Right.
And you have various modifiers.
I think that's some of where I was going. Yeah.
Mechasys very much hinges on a dedicated session 0. You need that session 0 to really appreciate and to give your players the framework with which to build their mecha.
Well, right, because that's yeah. I think a session 0 is pretty much vitally important for any campaign, but specifically with mecha because it's such a broad. It's like saying my next RPG campaign is going to be a military campaign. Okay, that tells me absolutely nothing.
Are we doing Saving Private Ryan or Starship Troopers?
Yeah, exactly.
Or are we doing Stripes?
Well, it tells me there's a command, a command structure, and that we're going to be dealing with it. So most likely it's going to be, we're taking orders from somebody, and then we're going to go shoot somebody.
Right, but in that vein, you could also do that as, are you playing a campaign of a stranded unit that's cut off from everything and trying to find its way home?
Sure.
See, I wouldn't call that a military campaign, personally. That's more like a team survival campaign.
Fair, but if you're doing it in the context of, say, Twilight 2000 or something like that, it's got very military underpinnings to it. Or if you were to play, say, an Eberron campaign where you're playing this Siren squad that somehow was not in Seer when the morning happened, and now you're this unit that no longer has a country to belong to.
I ran that campaign, actually. That was my 4th edition campaign.
Damn you, how did you steal my idea that you didn't know I had?
And decades ago.
Before I had it. But yeah, so like mecha, like you said, you've got to have, and I think that's the thing that you did with how you guys built Mechasys is that you can take it and tell the story you want to. And I don't know a ton about BattleTech, other than it seems like it is a very militaristic, tactical simulation game where it's set in this war of mecha.
Yep, absolutely.
And I mean, look, we're gamers. We can take things apart and make them do other things. We always do. But Mechasys is already taken apart for you. You just have to put it together the way you want it.
Exactly. Do you want giant eldritch knights that are able to fight dragons toe-to-toe, a la Escaflowne? Do you want a steampunky looking mecha that looks like the Iron Giant? Do you want Gundams? Do you want BattleTech? Do you want Pacific Rim? What do you want out of the robot? What do you want out of the mecha? We did our best to make Mechasys able to handle whatever it is you want to throw at it.
Well, what I've gotten to read of it so far, I'm very impressed because I like the fact that, like you said, you've gone and you've made chassis, but in doing that, and you may even have rules there for, okay, you want to design your own chassis because your game has got this, whatever. Okay, but even so, I've got a pattern I can look at and go, I can deconstruct this little tiny segment of it and then build my own thing over here and still use all the add-on rules.
Yeah, chassis really are just a different kind of like archetype or species rules. So if you've got any proficiency or knack or even just basic understanding of how to build a species or how to build an archetype, you could build a chassis. If you see something, if you can't find a chassis that fits exactly what you're envisioning, you could absolutely do that. One of our chassis was even developed by one of the playtesters, Jason Marker. He wanted to build a support mech, and none of the chassis really reflected that. I'm like, dude, that's brilliant. He's like, yeah, I could see it doing this and another, and Jason's been making vehicles for the Star Wars role-playing game since FFG got it. So, if I figure if there's a guy who's going to be able to come up with some decent rules for an archetype, he's in that crowd. So he actually created the support chassis, and all of that was his input, and absolutely threw it in there. So yeah, but that shows you that if there is something that the game needs, you can modify and make it. Just keep the idea of the balance of like, if you're going to give it this, make sure you take away something or give it a cost, reduce its starting build points, construction points, all that stuff.
Now, or you're on that, the starting build points, construction points. I don't see where, let's just say you wanted to play at a situation where all your mecha were very advanced.
Okay.
Mhm.
I don't see how it causes a problem if you just say, okay, this is your base mecha frame, and so it's 50 points higher than a base mecha frame is supposed to be. As long as we all start with the same base one, it doesn't matter.
Well, that's why we got the frame pool at the very beginning. It's like step one, you decide how advanced the mecha are going to be. Are they kind of basic where you start with 50 points, basically 50 XP? Are they advanced where you start with 100 XP, which you could kind of think are along the same lines of just like your basic average starting characters? And then you've got the supreme pools where you start with 150 points. So that's almost like that superhero tier. Like you're slapping on that superhero tone to this game and you're like, here's an extra 50 points. But then on top of that, that allows you to buy out each of the chassis. And like, yeah, if you've got the 100 points, you know that, okay, I'm basically building a character. So I can expect maybe I can get a 4 in there, at the very least a bunch of 3s, and probably not have to worry about a 1 unless I really want that 4, or maybe even a 5. Whereas if you've only got 50 points, you can kind of see it's like, okay, these are really going to be grunt mass-produced suits, and they're not going to be able to do a lot of things really good. They might be able to do 1 or 2 things really well. But that's it. Everything else is just going to be like whatever I get.
Much more emphasis on the pilot as opposed to the mecha.
Right. How good can the pilot maneuver and manipulate this bare bones average mech?
Now, one thing that I will ask about, do you guys have anything either in Mechasys or in the works or anything about, like, because obviously when you're mechs versus mechs is easy to do out of this, but let's say you're doing mecha versus kaiju, which is a classic thing. Do you guys have anything that you're working on with big bad monsters?
At its raw base, you boil it down, put it in that crucible. All kaiju are biological mech.
Mhm.
You build a mecha, you say that its beam weapon that's mounted in its head is actually its atomic breath. Its energy claws that are on its beam sabers are actually just like energy and radioactive powered claws. And you can absolutely, all you just like the glory and essence that is Genesis, you just skin it differently.
Mhm.
So you can absolutely just take your average mecha, build it up with these points if you really want to follow the points. I mean, a GM is a GM. You can just, GMs can come up with whatever they want, but they can take literally any mecha that they can think of, just make it biological. There's your kaiju.
Damn it. That was entirely too simple of an answer.
Now,
Steve,
Yeah,
remember,
we
we're
could
talking about
I mean,
Genesis.
Well,
we were
no,
talking about Genesis, and like Phil said, you want to go fighting dragons in these mecha? Okay.
have at.
And what's the difference between a dragon and a kaiju?
a couple of silhouettes.
Maybe.
Potentially,
Depends on your kaiju. Depends on your kaiju and your dragon.
Yeah, some kaiju are like silhouette 5. Like Godzilla's probably silhouette 6, I think. I think he's
But
about
ancient Leviathan dragons are probably similar.
Yeah, most dragons in, I think the Terranoth dragons are like 4 or 5 at tops. But Godzilla and Kong could stand on an aircraft carrier, and an aircraft carrier is like silhouette 6, I think. So they're probably like silhouette 5, 6, something like that.
All right. So one more technical question then, and I know Phil, with your Palladium Rifts background, you'll know where I'm going with this. What about damage scale? Because obviously, if your mech has a strength 3, well, your Bob the Adventurer with strength 4 is not going to win an arm wrestling contest with this mecha, no matter how good he rolls.
Sure. So that kind of like opposed challenge where you've got the character with a certain strength bronze score and you got the mecha with even a lower bronze score, you are still talking about the fact that it is a vehicle. So at that point, you kind of have to, if you're a game master, you kind of have to look at that going, okay, can a Arnold Schwarzenegger or the Mountain type character, guy who had like a brawn of 5 or even arguably 6, could they overpower a mecha with even a brawn of 1? Maybe a brawn of 1, it's possible, but you are talking about a difference of scale. Like a silhouette 1 character can really overpower a silhouette 3 or silhouette 4 mecha if you're not also including like a superheroic trope in there.
Right.
So there is a certain level of the game master just kind of has to look at things and make an adjudication of, okay, is this an impossible task? And thus no matter how much you're going to try it, you can't do it. I don't care what your brawn and your resilience are. You're not breathing liquid. You're not breathing hydrochloric acid. It is an impossible task. But when do things become easier? When do things become harder? That's why it's a whole lot of like the game master needs to make some decisions of like, okay, a Silhouette 5 character trying to rip open a steel fire door. That could be a daunting task. But a mecha with a brawn of 1 trying to do that same thing, that might be an easy or an average task.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff stuff like that, it does require the GM to kind of do some scaling on the fly in that regards. As far as damage goes, let's face it, if you're hit by a car, it's gonna hurt. So if like a tactical strider, like you taking a mecha from the expanded rulebook, if a tactical strider steps on you, you're in for some pain. Even if I would give like the tactical strider like a brawn of 1 or brawn of 2, that's still 10 to 20 points of damage. It's gonna hurt.
Yeah. If you're still counting your damage absorption as soak, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Genesis does use the 10-to-1 rule for vehicles, so, and I don't see why you couldn't expand it somehow, maybe via silhouettes to, this much silhouette difference is 10-to-1, and if you double that, like the old, I remember from the WEG D6 Star Wars days where you had personal scale, like Starfighter scale,
your scale,
and capital scale,
capital, Death Star.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you know what I mean. Like you had that, and if I remember right, those were steps of 10.
Yeah,
but it's been a long time since I played WEG.
But basically, the planetary scale and personal scale of Genesis works very well and falls under a not broken, don't fix it terminology.
Pretty much.
Or mentality.
Suffice to say that I would say that if you built a Silhouette 4 mecha with a brawn of 1 and had it punch a guy at character scale and it connected, I would probably at the very least add the silhouette size to the damage before applying, okay, add 4 vehicle scale damage. I'm sorry, you are paced.
Well, even then, it's a base of 2 damage. 1 for the success, 1 for the base 1 brawn.
Well, I think that goes with the spirit of the game, though, right? You're emulating. You're not trying to simulate and crunch hard numbers.
Precisely.
You just got stomped on by a crane.
Yeah.
Well, and by the time you've gotten to this point, you've realized you've made a mistake. About the time that you're having the conversation of, okay, how much damage does the robot punch deal? You've realized you've made a mistake.
What is this rapidly approaching shadow?
Right.
Will it be my friend? The answer is no.
So, since we're at a little bit of a lull, I do have one listener question for you guys.
Oh, hey.
And this comes from Brett. You remember Jesse.
Yeah, this is one of our, just to shout this out here, this is one of our Patreon tiers, is that at our $5 tier, you do get to ask questions to our guests when we do have them on. And this is, as Steve said, one of our listeners that is part of that $5 tier. So definitely something to...
This is cool. I haven't heard of you doing this yet.
Yeah.
So Jesse's question, and it's a 2-part question, but I'll let you both answer the first part before I hit you with the second part. So he
crafty
wants to know what your favorite Big Stompy mecha are.
Sure. Mine is easy because I'm a Voltron Lions fan, flat out. Just I loved it when I was a kid. I loved the reboot. Just pretty much everything about it just struck me sweet spot. That being said, I did really enjoy BattleTech, but nothing quite like a bunch of lions coming together and forming Blazing Sword.
Fair.
Respect. My appreciation of the mecha genre, as one might assume, is rather large. If I had to pick a current favorite, something that just really appeals to me on multiple levels, I would have to say the 01 and the 02 Unicorn Gundams. More particularly leaning towards the Banshee, but I really do like the straight up Unicorn as well. Every now and then over the past couple years, I found myself either renewing a Netflix, or once I got kind of like the realization of, oh, hey, wait, my partner has a Netflix account that she keeps on going. I'll just borrow her password. Actually, no, Netflix, I don't borrow password. Actually, doesn't matter. Haha, we're a household now. Eat it. Sorry, tangent. But every now and then I just find myself just throwing on the 7 episodes of Unicorn and just enjoying it. I've got a bunch of Unicorn Gundams. I have, for those of you who know what this phrase means, I have a perfect grade Banshee that I am waiting for my skill set to reach the point to do everything I want to be able to do with that kit. So I would have to say the Unicorn Banshee is my top favorite, with the Unicorn as an adjacent sister.
Just build it and then weather it later. I'm telling you, that's the best way to do it, because you'll kill yourself. You'll sit there and stare at the box. Just build it and weather it later. Because
honestly, my problem since I got it in April of 2020 has been I haven't had a place to build it. My partner moved into our current apartment at the end of 2020, and I kind of had space before that, but once she moved in and we just didn't have the space to devote to it, bought a house recently. As soon as I get my house set up, the Banshee's coming out of the box.
Yeah. I coming from one person that's built one of those to another, just build it and then weather it later, because I know exactly what it's like to look at it and go, I got all these things I want to do. I want to make it look like this. No, just
the general perfect grade or the perfect grade Unicorn?
I can't remember. The box is in the other room. I think it's just the general perfect grade.
Okay,
but
cool.
I know the perfect grade Unicorn is not too it's crazy, but it's not too far off from.
It's just a really big kit. Just a lot of parts.
Yeah.
I maintain that Phil was just scared of the cat that he's having its way with the mecha in mid-process.
Sai would never have gone near it. Sai would have been like, what's that? That's weird about.
So the second half of this question, and having experienced Jesse once yourself, Brett, you can appreciate this. Why is it Mega XLR?
Chicks dig giant robots.
Yes, the monster trucker of giant robot anime.
Look, I stand by. I know you haven't. I don't know how you can watch it yet, Steve. I'll have to find a way for you to do that. You would love Megas XLR. You
probably would.
It is you, my dude. Like it is very much like if you were the main protagonist and built a mech. The concept of Megas is that he built a mech out of his car in his garage.
Okay, I'm with you here.
And it is
and flame paint jobs.
Yeah, it's all the 8 balls and flaming eyes and
massive chrome grill.
Yeah, like it is. Yeah, it's you if you built a giant robot, Steve. I'm telling you, because it is like.
Does it have a car for a head?
Yes, it does. Yep. Yeah, okay. That's his car. It's such a great show that just got canceled out of nowhere. It was just one of those ones that didn't do well, and it just.
There is absolutely no reason you couldn't go out there and create a Megas XLR Demolition Derby role-playing game.
No.
Campaign.
Do it out of Mechasys and have fun.
Absolutely. No reason you can't.
Yeah, there is one reason. I got too many things going on.
It has mud flaps.
It does, yeah.
It has naked woman mud flaps.
Yeah. Yeah. What part of every cliche car thing have you not figured? Like,
because I've never heard of this show before, so I have no answer for the listener question. I'm just catching up, and you get to come along for the ride.
I hadn't heard of it either, so
it's definitely, if you haven't watched it, it's a definite. At least check out the first episode, because the first episode gives you everything you need, and then after that, you don't have to watch the whole series, but you understand.
Okay.
Well, I recently discovered there's a whole bunch of anime hidden in various places on the streaming services that I do have access to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I may start digging around some more.
There you go.
Oh, but
Megas XLR is fantastic.
But yeah, that was fun, and like I said, it felt like that was a good way to break that one apart.
Yeah, probably safer that way.
So I got to tell you, the one other thing I want to ask: the art on page 42.
42.
Oh
yes.
Was that a custom piece you guys had done?
No.
Okay.
Okay, this is actually a funny story because of copyrights, being what they are, I have had to go into certain places of the web that is the best not to name or know about in general. But you have to go to in order to defend your copyright and your product. Therein, I found a commenter calling me out essentially on the fact of, oh, how'd they get Stars Without Number artwork? I bet they just stole that. They didn't get the rights for that. Well, true fact, you can get the Stars Without Number art pack on DriveThruRPG for nothing, and you therefore get the license to use the artwork. And it was super beneficial for both Starcana as well as Mechasys in this particular panel.
Okay, because it's reminiscent of some art I've seen in other games, and it
Stars Without Number.
Well, there's a reason for that. The funny part was about a year after Starcana came out, the art pack made its way around again, became popular again. People like noticed it for the first time, and people actually came up to me and said, "Dude, you should totally use this in a Starcana supplement." I'm like, why? We used it in the core book. Like, this would be great for Starcana. Yes, it was.
Totally was.
Thank you.
that's got to be a challenge for you guys though, as a small publishing house though, is art, and especially if you're doing things that, Mecha in particular, there's so many iconic, and it is all pretty much art based. It's not, print fiction for the most part in terms of words. And let's be honest, even if you're able to full on publish a whole game, the RPG industry is not one where you're going to make a ton of money, much less if you're restricted as you are with the Genesis licenses to web only publishing and etc.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that had to be challenging to go, how do we make this book and have, and the artwork you have is very nice. And I'm not trying to demean that at all. Just, was that ever a concern as to, can we make this book look the way we want it to with our budget?
Absolutely. Yeah, no question. We do have a lot of great original artwork. A lot of that was done by Phil, or we actually went onto a Facebook group of mine that is for D&D artwork. There's lots of great artists on there, and we put up a call for artists that were available for commission. And within 3 hours, we had about 100 people with offers and links and portfolios and stuff like that. And within a day or two, Phil had narrowed it down to the styles they wanted to and started writing up contracts and such like that. And then over the next month or two, we had the art rolling in, and we were just ecstatic with what we came out with. But yes, to answer your point, artwork is definitely the largest expense that we have as part of the production,
Yes.
because of the fact that we want it to look good up front. We know that art sells books. We know that covers sell books. And I've heard of a theory of a idea of, you can take your earnings from DriveThruRPG, turn around, buy stock art on DriveThruRPG, and then add it to the book later. Like, yes, you can, but then you're asking your buyers to go back and download the book again to get the pretty artwork.
Yeah,
It's a thought.
I mean, updates and revisions are one thing, but
yeah, to just go art to be added later is a little bit asking.
I also can't fault folks who have to do that. If you've got a neat idea and you want it to get out on DriveThruRPG, and you just don't have the ability to give it the art that you feel it deserves, and you get it out there, it makes some money for you, and you comes in and they're like, you know what, I really want to get a good cover piece on this. You know what, I really want to get a good art piece on this. I want to buy this art pack now that I've seen it now. And that's the other thing. Like, it could be that, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this art pack was out here, that it existed.
Yeah.
I can't, and I won't fault people for that. We are very lucky to be in the situation that we are in, where we had the ability for both this and Starcana and ADC and all these other projects that we've had to say, like, okay, we really need something custom for this.
Mhm.
Let's put it in the budget. And let's understand that, it's going to be X number of copies before we really start making a profit off the book, or actually start like covering the cost it took to make the book.
And that's the investment gamble.
It's the investment gamble. But fortunately, Mechasys has done rather well.
Yep. And that's the other benefit, is that the artwork from Mechasys also goes into the supplement, and therefore there's now 2 sources of income from the same artwork purchase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the pieces that I wanted, there was a Lance Burgos who did the I call it the Genesis looking mecha, that it's on the cover of Big Guns Blazing Swords. It's that part piece that looks like it was done in the style of all the artwork from the Genesis core rulebook, that kind of orange and blue and pencil line unfinished plan artwork. And I wanted that piece in there in the core book Mechasys, and I'm like, oh, this is a good piece. I want to use this as the cover for Big Guns Blazing Swords, and so we did. So
yep. Yeah, I just added the blue background with the gears, and therefore it was a cover.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into anything else, anything more you guys want to say on Mechasys specifically?
Well, I can say that I have designs for 3 other supplements that are like of Big Guns Blazing Sword size or even smaller, because they're just little add-on type stuff. The next thing that I was working on was Power Armor, Silhouette 1 Mecha, although that kind of could expand up to Silhouette 2. Silhouette 2 Mecha could kind of bridge the gap there. That was kind of what the rules I have going on for that are sort of an adaptation from my Power Armor rules that I did for my Fallout Genesis setting way back in the day. So I've got some ideas and designs on that. The other supplements I've got are, of course, the one thing that's the glaring omission from the rule set. Where's my combiners? I have ideas and designs on how to do combiner mecha. And I've also got ideas, a 3rd supplement of how to do transformers.
And that's sort of what started it all in the first place, right? You were beginning to hack together a Transformers setting or a Transformers hack out of Genesis or something.
Yeah, figuring out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
How to do it, yeah. Transformers actually is a little easier because you just kind of omit the fact that there's a pilot. It's not so like the Transformers expansion might be the smallest one. Theoretically, actually, no, that's probably not true because I probably want to come out with a whole bunch of like new upgrades.
Yeah.
Tons of upgrades, or at least like say, okay, don't buy upgrades, use talents, and like inspire like what talents should be shifted and whatnot. Some rules for that. But so those are the 3 supplements that I've got. When will they happen? I don't know.
Yeah.
But we're working hardcore on our current project as the company, and once that's done and out the door, we'll see what happens after that.
That's fair. I was going to say, I do like the way that you did the upgrades for the mecha, effectively just reskinning talents, because it works so well and like
it just fit.
Yeah,
it just fit. How do you tweak them? How do you tweak it? Do you spend money? Yeah, you could spend money, but like if you're building these as characters, build them as characters.
Yeah, we had an idea mainly for a BattleTech style game where you have a money to build point ratio established in order to buy upgrades with actual money.
Yeah. But then there's narrative. I mean, you kind of sit back and go, yes, we can do it that way. But with the narrative basis of Genesis, it just made more sense to say like, okay, as your character gains XP, your mecha gains XP too. And maybe your game master says, okay, at these, unlike characters who can generally spend their XP willy-nilly whenever, unless the game master says, hey, this is kind of a continuation, don't spend your character points yet. The GM can really say, okay, these upgrades, depending on what you want to do for your mecha, you can make small upgrades here and there, but anything you want to make, like if you want to give it a new weapon, you want to give it new maneuverability ratings, you want to up some of the larger upgrade talents, basically. Yeah, those are going to be saved. You're going to need to like a specific time and like, either your mecha gets an upgrade pack or you get the Mark II version of your mecha delivered by whoever or whatnot. Some time to really do these massive upgrades. So,
yeah, makes sense. All right. So, all that said, do you two want to take a few minutes or whatever to also talk about just Studio 404 in general? I know we have a lot of listeners that probably already know who you are, but we probably also have a few that don't.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I know it's more than just the 2 of you, but I'm not entirely sure as to how many players and what all you're all into.
We are a company of 4 right now. And myself, Brett's wife Kimber, and our friend Alex Newbold. We were one of the first companies to get in on populating the Foundry on DriveThruRPG. And we've put out a few products. We've put out Starkana, which is our fantasy space opera campaign setting. A couple supplements for that, an adventure and a follow-up magical supplement, because it is space opera with magic. Think of it as like Twilight Imperium, if you also threw in magic as well. It's kind of the niche it filled. Brett has also been very prolific with a lot of what we call toolbox products, Legwork and Larceny, the GM's Toolkit, I know I'm forgetting a bunch of others.
The setting notebook, right?
Setting notebook, yeah. But obviously, we put out Mechasys, we put out Big Guns Blazing Swords, and Brett, have you talked about? Yeah, of course, because we're advertising it on our on our Facebook feeds.
Right.
Our next campaign setting is Anarchy in Dragon City. What's our tagline for that?
It's a cyberpunk urban fantasy setting.
Mm-hmm.
Be as punk as possible by sticking it to the man or something like that.
Right. Megacities keep people safe from a raging global magical storm while also trapping them inside a draconic dystopia. Magic and cybernetics augment players beyond normal people for a price. You're Lancers sticking it to the Drakes one job at a time.
Well, by the time this airs, it will be post you debuting the adventure at Gamer Nation Con. So
Yep.
Right. But fortunately, that module was run through a couple of decent playtesters, so the people at Gamer Nation Con don't get to see the rough edges.
We sanded those suckers down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. I don't know if Brett had told you, Phil, but Steve and I and a couple of friends got to help him play test that once, and we had a good time.
Oh yes. More importantly, I told him what I learned from the exposure.
Yes.
Lots of things.
He came the next we have meetings like every 2 weeks, and the next meeting he came back saying, okay, so some things are changing.
Well, I'm excited to see what that looks like.
Yes, I'm glad we could be helpful.
Yeah.
We super value our playtesters.
I'm still tickled about the whole. So let me get this straight. Your plan is you're gonna drive by, grab the person, pull them into the van, and keep punching them and yelling, "Go to sleep, go to sleep." That's your plan.
Enter Jesse is all I'm going to say.
That was Jesse.
No, that wasn't Jesse. Jesse,
that
is
was
what
my
actually
plan.
happened.
That was
No, Jesse saved the plan.
Yes. Jesse saved the day on that one.
Yep.
I was all for the drive-by kidnapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, young Steve was going to be the go to sleep guy.
Go to sleep. Go. Just go.
I mean, that's all planned.
It is. That's what I said. There was no judgment in my tone. Just clarifying, this is your plan. There was no judgment.
There was a lot of people that said no.
There was a dawning realization from the rest of the PC base, but I had no judgment.
Hey, sometimes nobody was coming up with anything. I had to put something out into the ethos.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And sometimes hearing a plan is better than just coming up with it on the fly.
Yeah. I thought it was a brilliant idea.
Oh God. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, hindsight's 2020, you know. But
I was definitely not thinking about. So you're in the back of your van, and this attack has the blast quality.
Sing her a lullaby with my fists.
So ADC is really kind of the brainchild of Brett and Kimber, and they've done a really good job. I really enjoy how this is shaping out, and I think it's going to. First of all, just as a setting, it's interesting, it's intriguing. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to play there, especially if you're a fan of the cyberpunk genre and the fantasy genre and where that Venn diagram overlaps. You should enjoy it, but also just like seeing what's coming out of it, the creativity and the uniqueness of the setting. You think you know what you're getting, but then as you scratch deeper at the surface and you see how deep the story and what's going on in the world goes, it's really impressed me. It really did. So I'm enjoying seeing where this goes, and I can't wait for folks to get it in their hands and slap it down on the table and let us know how it goes.
Well, I think the thing that Steve and we talked about this since, the thing that we both like about it is that it feels like it has the appropriate amount of grit for a cyberpunk setting, where Shadow of the Beanstalk is a really, really, really cool sci-fi setting, but it's too sleek to be cyberpunk.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've compared it. It's like the difference between this rip-snorting garage-built hot rod and a Ferrari.
There are definitely aspects of Shadow of the Beanstalk that it's certainly dystopia, but it's not, in some cases, depending on how you play it, it's not punk.
Yeah, like I
Yes.
said, I'm not saying
Sometimes it's like looking at the artwork, it's hard to see the dystopia. Honestly, you see all the gleam and glamour and the super tech and stuff like that. So I get what you're saying without knowing the setting terribly well.
In the artwork, especially, I wish they would have thrown some background dystopia. You know what I mean? Like have smiling faces, but there's a guy getting arrested on the street.
And maybe
You know what I
one of
mean?
the
Like,
reasons- I can't help but wonder if one of the reasons why it just doesn't look dystopian and gritty enough to us is that it looks kind of familiar.
Yeah.
well,
Maybe we've just gotten used to it.
Yeah, but like some of it's very much in the overarching Genesis FFG Edge art style.
yeah, that's another problem. Is it kind of has that not being rude to Genesis, but everything in like aside from what you guys put out, a lot of Genesis stuff looks the same.
Sure.
Like you look at the books and you're like, this is I can tell immediately this is a Genesis book. Like you could blindfold me, open a random page, and I'd look at it and go, this is Genesis.
Uh-huh. That's actually a very good point about when we put out Starcana, is that while I took the template of Genesis to work from, because I was really this was going to be my second book to work in InDesign, I took the template as a baseline, but then changed pretty much everything about it.
Yeah.
So like it matches in the general notes and headings and what things mean, but I changed the colors, I changed the fonts, I changed the background and stuff like that to make sure that Starcana looked different than everything else on Genesis.
I think that's good.
Yeah, that's
because the artwork, not just the artwork, but the layout and everything in a book can so much affect the tone.
Mhm.
To me, the book that just, so to speak, nailed it for me is the Cyberpunk 2020 core book.
Mhm.
Everything in that book screams what they wanted to get across to you in that setting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And especially for late 80s publishing.
It feels like a zine you would pick up off it feels like a zine you would find in college.
Mhm.
Like most of that book has that feeling, and so it does sort of feel very punk rock. And that's like, I think that's what's kind of, as somebody who's read and played with Android, I don't know. Shadow of the Beanstalk, I mean, I don't know. I really don't. There's things I would do differently, but I understand where people's taste come in and why that's something that, oh, well, I really like how this is. Okay, that's cool. I understand where you're coming from, but for me, it doesn't have, like, Cyberpunk to me is like Blade Runner. It's but it's not just Blade Runner. It's like
Ghost in
give
the
me
Shell.
Ghost in the Shell, or like,
Actually, that might be a closer analog to Android. Is Ghost in the Shell
Yeah.
has the much more sleek cybernetics and stuff like that, and is far more wireless.
it does, but at the same time, it doesn't. Ghost in the Shell still has that criminal element to it.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yes, everything it boils down to, hunting and being police, but like, I don't know, it just has that underbelly that I feel like Android's missing teeth in a way.
Yeah. And like I said, at least for me, I'm not trying to say that I think it's a bad book. I don't in any
Oh,
way
no.
regret buying it, anything like that. It just, as to what I expected on the surface from it being the Genesis Cyberpunk title, it didn't deliver.
I can see that.
There's our Shadow of the Beanstalk rant for the day.
I'm sure if I knew more about the setting and like the history of the various card games and whatnot of Netrunner, then maybe I could understand and answer these concerns better, but I don't.
Yeah, I have a little understanding of the card game, and I know some of that, and I know that like there were editions of the card game that had very different art than that book ended up with.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I have absolutely no background with the card game, so
The original card game, the Netrunner card game, was based on net running in Cyberpunk 2020.
Yeah.
Goes all the way back that far. And then, various companies bought the rights and eventually got over to Fantasy Flight Games, and they've got it. And then when Genesis came along, they're like, well, we need a Cyberpunk setting. Well, we've got Netrunner.
But even the
Android setting, let's use that.
I'll say this, even the Fantasy Flight Games card game version of that in Netrunner is just got a little bit more grit and teeth to it. So I'm not sure why.
I'll see that.
I'm not sure why that didn't translate over to the RPG, and I don't know if that was I don't know if it's a stylistic choice or if it's just something that when they were working on it, it just didn't happen to translate over very well.
I'm going to say I didn't get a chance to read the novels and the novellas for.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a little more, if those grasp the cyberpunk genre a little bit better and show kind of some of that grittiness, because I could see that.
Possible.
Yeah.
Because it can be tricky, as we'll tell you, it can be tricky to really get and portray that gritty cyberpunk feeling while trying to establish the world and trying to be kind of encyclopedic about it. And one of the things that can definitely help that, as we've talked about, is the art.
I'll say this from what I've seen of your world is it definitely has it's got it. It's there. And you're right. The art does play a massive part in that. So yeah, I'm very excited to see very excited to see Anarchy in Dragon City when it actually finally it comes out as a full book.
Can't wait.
I can't either.
When we finished the playtest, you told me the best thing that a writer wants to hear is, as soon as this book comes out, I am buying it.
Yep. Yeah, you've already sold you've already
When
sold
is
it to
the
me.
street date?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm on board. Yeah, I'm picking it up. And I think, grit is also a thing I think that to a certain point is tricky to do in Genesis because
It's not that tricky. It's a 5-point talent, you ranked it
Yeah,
by.
I mean, it gets more expensive the more
Yeah.
you get.
Sorry. Had to. Genesis humor. It's in my contract.
no, but because of the nature and the design of the dice system, grit in the kind of a setting context, you go, well, you turn the threat up. But the problem with just turning the threat up is that now you're not getting the advantage to do the cool things that you want to do.
Mm.
And, when we talked with Jay about kind of the core of the narrative system design, what would he say the if you want to call it the mean roll for a balanced pool is failure with advantage.
Right. It's either going to be fail with advantage or success with threat is the general
Which
gist.
is what I thought it skewed towards. I thought the dice, the general dice pool pound for pound, it skews towards success with threat.
No. He said your mean roll is failure with advantage, which is accomplished because failure is the absence of success, not the presence of failure. So in other words, if you have a roll that everything can't, because of the way it cancels out.
Of course, because everything cancels out. You're right.
Right.
You're right.
So you don't have to have failure to fail. You have to have success to succeed.
Yeah, the onus is on the dice to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love the Genesis engine and the dice system and everything. It's just I think that is one thing that is difficult to do with it just by its nature, but that's okay because we got a whole lot of other game systems if you really want to play something super gritty and whatever. Although I've heard good things about the latest thing that came out from Scarpy and Zumwalt, so I haven't got a chance to look at that yet. The what is it? Hell is Full.
Oh, the zombie setting, yeah.
Yeah. So
Or
I don't
the
know.
zombie expansion of Something Strange, yeah.
Yeah.
I would argue that if you are looking to the dice to give you grit, you are looking in the wrong place.
Fair.
The grit is part of the tone of the setting. The grit is what you see when you are looking around. The grit is what happens to you afterwards, like your ability to get the various medical treatment that you need after you got into a bad fight. The grit might be using, as opposed to the normal critical tables, you use the expanded critical tables that I'm forgetting his name right now, GM Narco came up with, which was very much cribbed from Rollmaster. Don't think I didn't notice. It's like some of them are damn close, sir. But I appreciate you. And therefore, okay, you got hit with this weapon.
Wasn't a criticism, that was a praise.
Indeed. So you got hit with a truncheon or a club, therefore you're on the bludgeoning critical table, and therefore you have this very detailed critical table of all sorts of blunt force trauma that happens to you. Oh, you got stabbed with a knife instead. Okay, we go to the piercing critical table, and therefore these various things like your eye gets gouged out. Horrible things can happen to you. That is where you get more grit and detail that you're looking for. As far as the setting is where you find the grit.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all, the garbage is all piled up because the sanitation crew went on strike, or they didn't go on strike, you didn't pay your bill, so you and your entire neighborhood is going to suffer for it. it's how the megacorps are keeping you down, man, is how you find the grit and the because we're gonna milk this dime word until it's used up. The gravitas of the situation.
I think we've got a good amount of stuff there with all that. So it's been a fun discussion.
We are good for nothing if not loquaciousness.
Hey, look, I mean, it's all good fun. It's good gaming conversation. But anyway, I think it's that time, Steve.
Game of the week.
Woohoo! Game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
All right. So, Brett, I don't know if you remember this. I did kind of brief you guys very quickly over Messenger this morning about this.
I can go first.
You want to go first?
I can go first. I got one. We were talking about mechs all episode, right? Pretty much.
Sure.
And there's a game that I'm absolutely in love with. It's a Japanese game. It is called Metal Wolf Chaos. You guys familiar with Metal Wolf Chaos?
I'm not.
From the name alone, I want to be.
Okay. Metal Wolf Chaos, the basic premise of it is that the President of the United States is a mech pilot. And it is his job to protect the world from shenanigans. And shenanigans ensue in Metal Wolf Chaos.
Wait, was this a video game?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay.
It is a video game. Very elaborate cutscenes. If you ever want to check it out and just watch the cutscenes, you can get a lot out of that. But there's a tabletop game called Full Metal President White House Mecha Chaos. It is $4 on DriveThruRPG.
I must find this.
Sweet mother of God. I have no words. I don't need to have words. This speaks for itself.
It does. It does exactly.
It's what's written on the tin.
Yeah. Vice President Nathan Wolf has launched a coup, bringing together traitors, soldiers, corporations, and individuals, as well as hired mercenaries to take control of the great nation. Now, in America, freedom is dead. Television is nothing but a pro-Wolf propaganda. Armed soldiers walk the streets. Let me cut to the end bit here. Full Metal President is an RPG, fast and furious action RPG. Roll some dice, narrate some explosions, and restore freedom to America.
And the last thing, okay, and Full Metal President versus zombie cyborg Theodore Roosevelt.
Yes, yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing in the game. You'll need pencils, paper, and some 6-sided die. Rock and patriotic music is recommended but not required. This is $4, and I am glad that I found a thing that the Mecha guys hadn't seen.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
You know, that's worth the $4 just to read it.
That came out in 2015.
Yeah, it did. It came out a long time ago, and well, yeah, something to check out. That is Full Metal President White House Mecha Chaos.
Whew.
Who wants to follow that one up?
I don't know if I can.
That's the show, folks. We're out.
Wow.
Oh gosh, that looks so much fun. That really does. Oh my gosh.
I can't even.
I can do a short and sweet one.
Okay.
So one of your previous guests, Optimistic Chad, and his company Frag & Unicorn Games is about to start up a Kickstarter for Misspent Youth. Fall in Love, Not in Line. And they're trying to get up to 200 followers before they launch, but it sounds like they've set their launch date for April 19th. And they're putting together a little event to do so. They've been playing this game for a while, so there's actually a YouTube series you can find to watch them play it and get a feel for it before you start backing the Kickstarter. Their tagline is Teenage Rebellion in a Fragged Up Future. Play the only kids that can stop the adult holes from ruining what's left of the world. From what I have seen of this is a punk as game.
Well, I actually know a little background on this.
Oh, good.
They are coming out with an updated and expanded version of this.
Mm-hmm.
This actually came out in 2018, was written by a guy named Robert Bowl, and he has since stepped away from the RPG industry.
Right.
But he gave the rights to the game to Opti and Fragging Unicorns, and so now they're relaunching it. So yeah, it is. I remember hearing a review of this back before all that happened, and yeah, it's a very, very punk, Clockwork Orange hackers meets Mad Max and Avatar.
Right.
Yeah, I remember hearing a review of this a while back on another podcast, and definitely very interested in that, and was actually talking with Opti a little bit this morning. So don't know that anything's happening yet around maybe him coming to talk to us about it, but it might.
All I know is that I've been a fan of Opti for a while. He's kind of the reason that Kimber and I came up with the idea for Anarchy in Dragon City. And when he started up Fragging Unicorns and they put out Gangs of the Undercity, I was all there to support him as much as I could. But at the same time, Gangs of the Undercity as a skirmish game is not my bag. I'm just not that much into having minis and stuff like that. So yeah, now that he's doing an RPG game, I am all for it.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I had actually thought about using that one, but I was not going to. So we still have only one theft in all the history of Game of the Week. So would you like me to go next, Phil, or do you have something?
I mean, it's your show, so I can take the next one. Similar to in the vein of Brett, because mostly like for the past several months, I haven't been able to get any gaming in. Just life is busy. I was home shopping, and then all of a sudden I found a home, and now I'm in moving mode. So haven't had a chance to. Also, I've got a couple assignments I'm working on, so I haven't had a chance to play. But one thing that I am definitely keeping my eye on. Let's say, you being a, we'll call it not fan, but familiar with Palladium and their various exploits, especially when it comes to Mecha. You may remember the Robotech tactical game that Palladium attempted to put out.
No, I don't. I was primarily into Rift, but I had a roommate in college that had some of the Robotech and Macross books.
If you want to see exactly how much a company can train wreck a multi-million-dollar Kickstarter, go look up the history of Robotech Tactics.
Okay.
Man, why you got to bring this back up?
It's
one of the first Kickstarters I backed. Yeah.
And I'm going to say I lucked out because at the time, my living situation, I was very much in the having zero spending cash, play money, call it what you want. I could not afford to back the Kickstarter, especially not at the level that I wanted to back it. And I'm really glad I didn't. Because, yeah, I would have been one of those guys who, where the f***'s Wave 2? Sorry about the bomb. But that was pretty much the mantra of most of the folks, like, where the hell is Wave 2? Where the hell is the rest of Wave 1? So I segue that way to talk about this. For the past year or two, this company called Kids Logic has had the license for Robotech. And they've been putting out all these 28 millimeter, actually not 128 millimeter, it's like 1/285th scale Macross minis. And they're gorgeous. I've been able to see a couple of them in person, and they're just beautiful. If I had the time to devote to miniatures again, I would have gone all in on this, and I would have already owned hundreds of dollars worth of these things, and they would be sitting on top of the pile of the thousands of dollars of unpainted minis that I have over there in the corner.
Oh,
but
wow.
they
these
are
gorgeous,
right? And
What was
there's
that company name again?
Kids Logic, Robotech Macross.
I have a couple of them that are still at my parents' house, just haven't been moved over to my house yet.
Aren't they pretty?
Oh,
They're
so
so
nice.
pretty.
There you go, Steve.
They're so nice to paint too.
So they've always hinted that these things were going to be part of some miniatures war game. The Kickstarter for that war game launches April 12th. I look at it and it's very similar to X-Wing, as in it has like a starting point and an ending point. You use templates to see where your stuff goes. Movement happens simultaneously. And like it looks like the top tier will come with the Zentradi, a obviously not in the same scale, Zentradi flagship, and the SDF-1. And the SDF-1 will have two modes, carrier mode and robot mode.
Yes, obviously not.
Obviously not, considering that the Zentradi flagship was 5 miles long, not in the same scale. This game is. I'm
Wow.
looking at what's coming with they have that one final shot because they've got the video up on their site, Kid Logic. I'm looking at that final shot. It's like got to be like 100 minis and each of the 2 battleships, and I'm just sitting there going, that is not going to be an inexpensive package right there.
Mm-mm.
Considering each one of those minis is generally retailing individually for like $12.
Yep.
Those look impressive, though.
They do. Welcome to the wonderful world of 3D printing and computer rendering and computer modeling. This is why I own a resin printer. God save me and my budget if I were to ever get these as still files. It's a whole new world, folks, and it's pretty. So that is my game of the week. That is the thing that came up on my radar this week that I'm like, I have to think about that.
That is wow.
Am I willing to risk a potential Robotech Tactics situation this time around? But the advantage this time around is they have product out now, and I've seen it, and it at the very least, it looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
I have been trying to avoid falling down a miniature's hole for a long time now.
Yeah,
You're not helping this situation.
I mean, of course not, because I look over there and I see like, well, there's my clan, my Mech Warrior Kickstarter from the Clan Invasion boxes that I backed, and I'm like sitting there going, these mechs are so pretty, they're so gorgeous. I have one right here. It's a Wolfhound. It is fantastic. It is gorgeous. It is so pretty. I will never have time to paint you, will I? And here I am sitting about going, well, another 100 mecha. But then I have to sit and think about it going, oh no, then I could run a Macross campaign with Mechasys.
See, it's a business expense. It's research.
Write it off on your taxes.
Genius! You freaking genius! Yes! Business expense! You, sir. You. I salute.
This brought to you by tax season crunch time.
Damn.
All right. Well, if you're done, I have one to go to here.
I am done.
Okay. Unfortunately, I can't find a whole lot of information about this because the listing on drive-thru is extremely vague, but evocative in its own way. And the publisher's website doesn't actually have anything about it. But this is a game from Fat Goblin Games, and I believe Rick Hershey runs that. And it's a game called Happiness is a Warm Gun. It says you play emotionally unstable, balls to the wall, chaos-inducing, bloodlusting, adrenaline junkie mercenaries for hire, fondly called maniacs. With your loose understanding of morals, your murder-inducing antics, and special set of skills, you spend your days getting hired by bad people to kill worse people. This looks like John Wick, the role-playing game. And it's all of, for the PDF, $3.95.
Wow.
So-
Special note, apparently this title has adult content.
Yes.
And if you are not logged into your properly set account, it will not show up.
You've run into the thing. That's a new drive-through RPG feature because we didn't know that existed up until a certain point.
Yeah, and we're like going, I know this game was on here. I found it, a week ago.
And then I logged into my drive-through account and was like, oh, I can view this.
Yes. But yeah, now this is a very violent, over-the-top game, which has, well, some material and content that might be sensitive for some people. So it's not a game for everybody, but it looks like it could be entertaining is, a one-shot here and there.
Sure.
Oh, there you go.
The
first page, the first chapter title is "What the F is Going On." It's like they give you the opening bit, they give you a disclaimer, and they give it right at the beginning what the F is going on.
Yep, 3d6 dice system. Looks like it's really intended for not so serious, for those moments where you want to be a murder hobo and make it appropriate to the story. So yeah, it just looks entertaining and low investment, which is always a good thing.
Right. I mean, I'm now curious enough to add it to my wish list and find out later if it comes anywhere close to Human Occupied Landfill from back in the 90s by Black Dog Games.
I know someone who has a copy of at least part of that.
At least part of that? They ripped it up.
No, like there were like 2 or 3 volumes of it. There's somebody on our Discord.
You had to have a splat book just to make characters in that. Yeah.
That's possible.
I ended up falling down a rabbit hole, if you want to.
Yeah, you asked me about it, and then somehow Slappy got involved in the conversation. And...
Yeah.
Well, who invited Slappy?
I've known he's the one who got me into Rifts in the first place. Him and my roommate in college, he lived down the hall. So,
yeah, like I said, I ended up falling down a rabbit hole and found out that it's sort of a game, maybe, possibly.
They had dice. They had dice. No, they didn't have dice mechanics. They had dice guidelines.
They had dice.
Yes.
Somewhere in another room, and they were too lazy to go get them.
I just remember the big thing I remember was a classic dice example sort of thing of how penalties happen. And apparently the GM called for a roll to tie the guy's shoelaces.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, and do a roll at -6. And the player goes, -6? That's unfair. Okay, -12. So of course he rolls badly, gets some horrible negative number, and the GM narrates, okay, so the guy bends over to tie his shoes and his head explodes. It's just one of those things. It happens all the time. This is the tone of Human-Occupied Landfill, better known as Hole, put out by the White Wolf guys when they had a few.
Had a few.
Right. I didn't say of what.
Well,
all right. So what? Studio404.com or
Studio404games.com.
I was on the site the other day. I just have it bookmarked.
Yeah, so I take it that's where you guys can be found. Any individual Twitters or anything you want to push or publish or...
Yep, we're also on Twitter as Studio404Games, Facebook as well. Both of those places are very popular for us to post updates and teasers of artwork specifically to get interest going and to explain more of our setting away. If you're interested to hear more about Anarchy and Dragon City, we have a good amount of fiction up on our website and the blogs downstairs at Studio 404, where you can read some in-character stories and fiction to get more exposure to the world.
Very cool.
And with all that being said, we want to thank everyone for listening. As always, links to everything are in the show notes. Well, not to everything, but links to games mentioned, places to go, all that are in the show notes. You can find us anywhere podcasts are found, in Discord, Facebook, Twitter. Trust me, I'm working on more TikToks. I know I've said that, but I am.
But you did find your chickens.
I did find my chickens. That's part of the other TikTok I've been working on. But no, they got to find a home. Anyways, Patreon, all that fun stuff. Like I said, everything's in the show notes. Check us out. As always, we want to remind you to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @andrpgs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Cross.
3 years
Obsessed
ago.
No.
says the young Steve.
Look, I was obsessed with Macross.
Well, he was in on our playtest session that we had with Brett a couple weeks ago, and he's a delightful agent of chaos, is the way I would describe him generally as a player.
Mhm.
Okay.
Like, he's one of those people where he's not maliciously chaotic. He just will somehow innocently do something that you're like, I would never, like, the concept of that happening would have never come across any of my thought patterns whatsoever.
I don't know any players like that. Phil.
Where did we take the left? What do you mean? What left?
Well, this will actually won't air till
Where did you
after
take the
we're
left? Well, you
on.
see, you invited them into the game.
Again,
So
what
it all
left?
comes back to your fault.